Thank you. This is Elena and Bodhi. Elena just graduated from SOU with a music degree. And Bodhi is at Ashland High School. He's 16 years old. And he helped make a lot of those desserts you're all munching on, so that's pretty amazing. Yeah. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'm Mark Yaconelli. Not Mark Yaconelli. I'm not Mark Yaconelli. I'm Danielle, a stand-in while Mark is on book tour. Pretty nice, right? Yeah, that's good. You may not know much about me, so I brought my 4th grade report card along. And I'll read you what my teacher wrote, just so you feel more comfortable. Like, I've got this. Like, we're gonna have a good night. So here's what she wrote. Miss Davidian, she had hair like this. She wrote, Danielle is a delightful youngster. She has enthralled the class with her creative abilities, art, and creative writing, and has sparked her peers onto paths of creativity. Danielle has been accomplishing academic work of excellent quality. My art teacher said, Danielle is a talented art student. And my gym teacher said, Danielle must try and show more self-control. Less talking. So that gives you a little sense about me. What I love about the Hearth, and I think why Mark entrusted me with it, is I know that I get to perform a little tonight, but really what tonight is about is how we build community together. And so I want to acknowledge that before you all got here and are comfortable and crowded in those seats, people set them out for you. Yeah, yeah. Boy, you're going to clap a lot, huh? People out there made cookies. Ashland High School culinary program made us cookies and treats. Yes, let's just do it. Let's just do it. The folks set up tables and made it look really thoughtful and mindful out there in the lobby, so that's for you too. That's for all of us to enjoy. My partner in crime, Susanna, does everything. Where's Susanna? She's amazing, but she's amazing, right? Yeah, she's amazing. We create a space of belonging. We create a space where we are going to be listening to people's stories, and we have a really, before I roll through the evening, I'm pretty excited. I like doing one more just gratitude and acknowledgement of this land that we're on. So the chairs are on the ground, and the ground is, and this building is on our land of the Shasta, Takilma, and Latgawa peoples. These people, today the Confederated, I always get nervous because it's so important to me to get this right, so I just want to slow down for a second and say that today the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians are living descendants of these people. So let's take a moment to offer respect to the people of these nations, both past, present, and future. And let's take a moment to acknowledge the history of deceit, of wrongdoing, and Western settlement on their lands. And let's pause to appreciate the beauty of their languages, their knowledge, and their strength that inform our human experience today. And I encourage you to learn about the land you reside on and to join in advocating for the inherent sovereignty of the indigenous people. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. So you all raced here. It's Thursday night. You raced here, you got here, you met friends. Maybe you're here by yourself. You maybe ate dinner and came really quick. Maybe you got to go out. Maybe you did that. How many people got to go out to eat tonight? Something special. Yeah, so nice. Yeah, and you're sort of like, oh, tomorrow's Veterans Day. Maybe we don't have to work. Maybe we do. Maybe we're doing an event tomorrow, and hopefully you can take something from this that inspires it forward. But I wanted to let you know that today, one of the things I did was I asked 22 random strangers where they find hope. Where they find hope. Yeah, where they find hope. That was a weird thing to do, right? Some people were like, I don't know, like, are you crazy? Like, that's what it felt like, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. But do you want to know what they said? I think you probably know. They said Harry Styles. They said Led Zeppelin. They said going for a hike by myself. And then the rest of the things they said were about the connections they have with other people. Every single person. So I wanted to ask you before we do, at the beginning of an event, there's so much to do, right? I have like announcements to make and I have things, but you're here and you're my focus. So I wanted to ask you, you obviously came here for a reason. Can you tell me one word of what you hope to get out of tonight? Just one word, like let's just popcorn. Inspiration, hope. Yeah, shout it out. There's no laughter, community, connection, healing, community. Hand holding. Everybody hold hands. Awesome, fantastic. Connectedness, presence, cookies, laughter, love. Can I hear for love? Okay, yeah, all right. Awesome. Inspiration. We could use that, yeah. So, oxytocin is the feel-good hormone, and when someone tells a story and you relate to it, you increase that feel-good hormone. So tonight, I guarantee those things are going to happen. I just guaranteed it. If it doesn't, there's a return policy, so just see me at the exit. what I want to say is we're here tonight to support Rogue Valley Mentoring, so all of your money is going to Rogue Valley Mentoring. Yeah. What I learned tonight about Rogue Valley Mentoring is, one, they're accepting more mentors, and mentors are volunteers ages from, I think they said like 30 to 60 something, and the mentees are like, they go up to age 24. And so you get paired, and I asked them, do you have to swipe right to get paired with a mentor? But they said, phew, good crowd. So they said, no, we actually have a way of pairing based on interests and strengths and all those things. So are there young people who need mentors now more than ever, right? After 2 years of being, yes, we need this so much. So thank you, Rogue Valley Mentors, for doing this good work. Myself, I have a lot of mentors who are 23, so that's how I stay so young. So let's talk a little more about announcements here. Who is this stranger and where is Mark? Yes, I spoke to Mark on Wednesday. Who is this stranger and where's Mark? I spoke to Mark on Wednesday. He's in Texas. He was in Texas. I think he's in Arkansas now. And he told me to tell you something. So I'm going to do that. I asked him, I said, can you give me something in case this goes bad, Mark? And he said, listen, Danielle, I hosted an event, a storytelling event in Texas on Wednesday with a very, very progressive group of people during this crazy week, which has been elections, right? And he said, and they were feeling really sad. And so then someone was, telling a story about loss. And then he said, Danielle, do you watch the show Ted Lasso? And I said, yeah. And he's like, you're kind of like Ted Lasso's like long lost cousin. And I'm like, wow, Mark, thanks. And then he said, I want the people in Ashland to know that we've really created something special that we're longing for out in the country, and that he knows that because he was in Texas during election season. And he said, he quoted Ted Lasso to me, and I love Ted Lasso. I've watched it like 4 times. You'll all go home and watch that show. It's on Apple TV. But I went through my Rolodex of quotes, and I was like, what's he going to say? And he said, there's only one thing. Yep, that's what happened. There's something worse than being sad, and that's being alone and sad. So I say that to you because we are definitely, we're going to get sad tonight. There's going to be sad stories, and we're not alone. So hold hands, love. We're here. We created a space. We're in. So, phones, silence them. I forgot. Do that now. I want to talk about, speaking of Mark, I want to talk about, y'all had bookmarks on your chairs, and it was really fun to watch you go, these are reserved seats. They have things on the seats. So the Hearth has created a social norm where if there's something on the seat, you don't sit in it. And I just think that's cool. So the bookmark actually tells you how you can get a free copy of Mark's book. So if you want it for Christmas for somebody, put the order in now, because it takes like 6 weeks to get it. So you'll get it like Christmas morning. It'll be perfect. We hope, let's see, other announcements. We hope that you make a donation directly to the Hearth, because tonight all the proceeds go to Rogue Valley Mentors. And then the last thing is there's a one-day workshop online in January, the art and craft of personal storytelling. Mark's going to do it, not me. So if that would change your mind, that might be good. But it's January 21st, 9 to 4 p.m. Has anyone done that workshop? Yeah, it's really good. I got a lot out of it. I mean, and then you get to, just be fanboy of Mark's, which is always fun. I think I've covered all the announcements. Now, what the heck are we doing tonight, right? Because he gave me the Hearth. And I was like, Mark, you made a great thing. Like, I don't want to mess with it, but I kind of want to mess with it. So here's what we're doing. And he was like, it's going to be a mess, but it's going to go great. You're going to learn a lot. I was like, all right. So the first half of the Hearth here with me as your host will be, we're going to hear from 4 storytellers. they are amazing. I mean, they are amazing. We got to meet on Zoom. I've met them all out in the community. Some of you know them. We have Alan, we have Grace, we have Elliot, and we have Sudhir. And then we'll have a song at intermission. The second half of the night is dedicated to what comes up from our stories. So y'all are going to listen to these stories, right? And when you sit and you listen, right, things inevitably from your life come up. And you just go home with them, and you get in the car with maybe your friend or your partner, or and you go home with that story, and you don't get to tell it. But I am going to ask people from the crowd tonight to come up and tell their story. So, yes. We're going to open the second half of Spontaneity with, y'all know Kendra? Y'all know Kendra? Stand up, Kendra. Kendra. So I'm going to tell you more about Kendra later, but she is one of the Hamazons. She does improv. That's why I invited her. Yes, that was the main reason why I invited her, because what a great way to sort of funnel us into the second half, which is about a little bit of spontaneity, right? So she's like our transition piece. Now let me tell you this story. So we were all, I said, Kendra, you're going to come to the storytellers' feedback circle. The storytellers and I all got together, and we did a feedback circle. The lovely Grace gave us a tool to do feedback. I like, I wish, what if? Isn't that cool? Write it down, facilitators, write it down. So, I like, I wish, what if? And we gave that feedback. I invited Kendra to sit back and say, Kendra, I want you to listen to these stories, and whatever comes up for you, I want you to do at the second half of the hearth. So I have no idea what she's doing. Nobody does. She cooked it up in her kettle while they were telling their stories, and we're going to all see it together tonight. We're all going to experience it. Isn't that cool? Yeah. No idea what the heck's going to happen. So, how are we feeling? Enough of me already, right? Enough of me already. Okay, good. My friends, you have 4 storytellers tonight, and the first one will be Alan Hallmark. Yes, give him a round of applause. You know. I met Alan Hallmark at the Lantern, which I run at the Black Sheep. More about that later. But Alan Hallmark is a Vietnam veteran who was born and raised in Fort Worth, Texas. He moved to Oregon in January 1976 to become a reporter at the Medford Mail Tribune. After more than a decade in that job, he moved to the Portland area, where he became a federal public defender investigator. He moved back to the Rogue Valley in 2002 and has been a peace and social justice activist since 2003 and a co-founder of Veterans for Peace Rogue Valley chapter. Ready? No? Thank you, Alan. Is that mic good for you? Yeah.
We'll see.
Yes.
But first, thank you guys for, my goodness, there's a lot of you. Jiminy. Because I like to take pictures, I want to capture you guys just for a second. If you could put smiles on your faces, or maybe a peace sign, or do something fun. All right, there we go. All right. Okay, now you can go on my Facebook page. All right. Okay, now that's the fun part of my act. All right. Thank you all for coming tonight. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure all the other storytellers do too. The story I'm going to try to tell you tonight, and I wish I'd taken Mark's class. I'd be in better shape if I had, but I'll do what I can here, okay? The story I'm about to tell you is about a lost trove of love letters and the loss of my first true love. But I got to ask you guys, how many of you have actually written or received a love letter written on paper and put in an envelope? All you old people have. Well, good. There's a lot of you that have. Anyway, I just think that's interesting that we no longer write on paper and put them in envelopes, or not very many people do anymore. It's all done on a screen. So things have changed. Anyway, my story starts on the night of October 4th of 1967, when my wife Molly, age 20, and I, age 23, celebrated our last night together in a motel room in Killeen, Texas, just outside of Fort Hood, where the next morning I would be forced to board a train to Oakland and along with 2,000 other soldiers who were going to get on a ship in Oakland and spend 3 weeks crossing the Pacific Ocean before we landed in Vietnam. Yeah, that reminds me of the old song by Country Joe and the Fish. Come on, all you big, strong men. Uncle Sam needs your help again. And way out. Oh, well, you know the song. That night before we left, Molly and I shared an evening of mad, passionate lovemaking, tears, laughter, and promises to write each other every day and to stay true to each other. The next day on that train, I wrote my first love letter of the war to Molly, and she started filling up a spiral notebook with love notes to me, photos of herself and our friends, our cat Alice, colorful drawings, and more. We continued to write each other hundreds of letters over the next 365 days until I returned on October 5th, 1968. Let me remind you, or inform you, for those who may be younger, how difficult it was for two people to communicate with each other from 10,000 miles away 55 years ago. There were no such things as cell phones in those days. They weren't even invented for another decade or two. And making a phone call from a war zone in those days, at least for an enlisted man, was really difficult, and it was almost always a failure. You had to go to a Radio Shack and go through all kinds of maneuvers, and you never knew if the person you were going to call would be awake at the time that you call. So, machine, it won't get off of there. Oh, well. So I was not able to talk to Molly, and Molly was not able to talk to me for the entire year. In those days, I can't read. Okay, there we go. In those days, the Army could only send you to Vietnam for 1 year, and then you could come home unless you re-upped. Exchanging letters took 3 or 4 or 5 or more days to get from one continent to the other. And thus, mail call for me was the all-important event of the day. A mail clerk would sort our mail out and then yell your name out, and you would hope that you got your name read out. And I can tell you how low I felt and how depressed I felt if Hallmark wasn't called out that day. After I got to Vietnam, it took 2 weeks before I got my first mail, and I was pretty frantic to hear from Molly. Then I got that journal written in that spiral notebook, and I was in heaven for a couple of days, absorbing all of the love notes and the pictures and everything that she had sent me. Now, until just a couple of years ago, I had all of Molly's letters that she wrote to me while I was in Vietnam, and all of the letters that I wrote to her, because she saved them for me. And I spent a few years off and on typing them into my computer, thinking that someday I would write a memoir about my time in Vietnam and this love affair with Molly, because she gave me such great hope that I would survive this war and I would come home and we would go on with life. But then came the disaster that was September 8th, 2020, when the Alameda fire swept through Talent and Phoenix and destroyed thousands of homes, including my own. And with it, that big box of letters and the computer that had the letters typed on its hard drive, all destroyed. I thought I'd lost all the letters, but it turned out I found a few online that had been saved on the cloud. And those I can read a couple of snippets from those letters tonight, if you will. Let me start with a little intro to one of these letters. I was, as I say, in Vietnam on this hill outside of Pleiku, and that's where I stayed for 11 of the 12 months I was in Vietnam. I didn't have to go out in the boonies looking for the enemy. The enemy sometimes came to us and shot us up with mortar rounds and rockets, but I was in one stationary place for most of the war, my part of the war. Anyway, that night, a team of Viet Cong sappers infiltrated the ring of security around the base of Engineer Hill, and they locked up two guys on guard duty in a connex, a metal box that they were sleeping in. And then they went up on the hill and blew up some trucks and other stuff, and then they disappeared. And so our company commander, who was looking for fame in any way he could, thought he could find those sappers and then he would get a big medal for it. So he formed us up in two lines about 100 yards apart so we could sweep through the company and then shoot the sappers when they stuck their heads up. Well, here you have people armed with assault weapons sweeping towards each other in the middle of the night. I said, this is a recipe for disaster. So I jumped into a hole in the ground that I found, and I stayed there until that little exercise was over. Luckily, no rabbit jumped up or no sapper, and so no shots were fired. So I wrote about all this to Molly, and I also in another letter wrote, and I asked her, I said, I've got 6 alternatives for things we could do when I get back there. Which would you like to do? So she, in response to those 2 things, wrote this letter, or part of this letter, said, today I got 3 more letters from a stoned Allen. I had trouble understanding them, but certainly got a feeling for that place of death. Freaky story. What happened? You're getting short now, and you'd better be careful. I love you. I think we definitely ought to do either one of those 6 alternatives or something else entirely. How about getting a divorce and living in sin? Or we could fly to Mexico. Oh, I love you. Perhaps we have unlimited possibilities. We are special. You and me and you. Special because I can return as much love as you can give. And that's the answer to life. Yes, we are special. Soon I'll show you how special. I can hardly wait. In another letter, she told me about selling the big 66 Chevy 4-door sedan that my parents had given us as a wedding present. And she used the money to buy a little MG midget. In the letter, she said her friend Bill was helping her learn how to work on the midget so she could keep it operating. That mention of Bill was one of many that she that slipped into her letters over the months. And every time I saw his name, I would respond with a little heat in my letter back. But she would always smooth it over with many assurances that I was her true love and there was nothing to worry about. Everything seemed fine a few weeks before I was to come home, and then she wrote me this note. Hi, lover. I'm about to buy some stuff to keep for your return. Do you want some acid? LSD. And of course you want some grass. How about peyote? But mostly it will be fun to be straight with you. Lots of good stuff to share. I will never forgive the Army for taking you away, but I'll sure try to make up for it. Give my love to no one. Alice sends her regards. Spoiler alert, love letters won't save a relationship if one person isn't telling the truth, which was the case here. You can imagine how charged up I was at the airport when I flew into Seattle where I was to meet her. I was just about bursting at the seams. But she was not that way. She was subdued and quieter than I was. And I chalked it up to us being apart for so long and figured it would just take a couple of days for her to adjust. But she didn't adjust. It took a month of me asking her what was wrong and why are you acting this way before she finally broke down and told me that she had fallen in love with Bill, that banjo player, and wanted to be with him. But he had joined the Coast Guard and was in boot camp, so she couldn't be with him for the next month or something. So she wanted to stay with me until then, because she didn't have any place else to go and no income. I cried and cried and cried. I thought I'd never get over it. The woman I'd placed up on such a pedestal was faking it. I should have recognized the hints that she put in so many of her letters, but I ignored them, and now I was shattered. Molly did leave me, and it took a long, long time for me to get over that loss. But I did, and 4 decades later, I got in touch with her again. She invited me to visit her a few times up in Port Townsend, Washington, where she had retired after a career as a ship's captain driving tourist boats up in Alaska. She apologized many times for how she had treated me when I got back from Vietnam. But I told her that I had forgiven her years ago. In truth, she was the beacon of hope that got me through that year in Vietnam. And when she cut me free, my life went in an entirely different direction, and I became the man I am today. Reading and transcribing all those letters made me fall in love with that young Molly all over again in my old age. And I still love that young woman. I'm sad to report that Molly died of cancer in May of 2020, but her memory lives here in my heart. Thank you all very much.
Hi, everybody. It's me again. This gives me hope. Do y'all know what this is? No. It's a used tissue. One time I went to counseling. I was very lonely and very hurt. And I went to this new counselor who I didn't particularly care for, but I really needed to let some stuff go. And at the base of it all, what I realized was I was very, very lonely. And so I grabbed a tissue and I started to cry, and I was crying so hard, I just needed to cry. And when I was done, it was like calm after a storm, And I went to throw the tissue in the trash can, and in the trash can was full with tissues. And so I thought, oh, I'm not alone at all. There's a lot of people who have sat here and dumped these tissues in there. So anyway, I just wanted to give you a piece of hope. Used Kleenex. Recently, I met a new friend named Elliot. Elliot, I have a really good relationship to Elliot, like Pete's Dragon Elliot, like the old one with Helen Reddy, that one. Anyway, Elliot introduced me to an author, Rebecca Solnit. Do y'all know her? Have you heard of her? Yeah. So Rebecca Solnit defined hope, and I wanted to read it to you. She said, "Hope locates itself in the premises that we don't know what will happen, and in the spaciousness of uncertainty, there is room to act." Yeah, so anyway, now I get to introduce Elliot. Elliot Feenstra is a theater maker, gardener, and community organizer. He lives in Tequilma in the Illinois Valley and works at Rogue Action Center leading the LGBTQ Listening Project. Welcome, Elliot.
Thank you. This is the story of a house that I loved at the end of the world. When I was 24 years old, I had bleach blonde hair and a 6-inch rat tail. I was a couple years out of school at the University of Chicago, and I'd been living out west for a couple years, kind of moving between city and farm job. And the way my parents saw it, I was houseless. And the way that I saw it, I was adventuring. And I was generally like an anarchist punk tempered by a couple years of farming and gardening. And all my clothes were ripped, and I was like so hungry to work really hard and not have a boss. And my best friends in the world at that time were Z and Fox, my chosen family. And we'd all met in Chicago. We had a community garden in the same plot at 55th and College. And Z had half their head shaved. They loved to dance and like sing diva songs really loud. And they wrote zines. And Fox was from Miami. And when I met her, she always had this tiny backpack with a half bottle of wine in case there was a picnic. And she was a brilliant like poet and philosophy major and wore a lot of leopard print and just like attracted beautiful things to her. And together we were a crew. We were artists and queers and all former lovers in various configurations. And since we met, we had been writing to each other these really long emails about like wanting to live rurally and wanting to live on land. And we'd come to Southern Oregon and visited and learned about wild foods here. And I had this memory of learning about lomatium, and that like lomatium, if the root is dug at the right time, like if you dig it with a digging stick and crack the ground, the seed falls into the ground, and it's like co-evolved with humans. And so like that idea that humans are like part of the world and that our tending is like, it totally changed my idea about like what it meant to be a human, what I was here to do. So we decided to move to Southern Oregon and make our anti-capitalist, queer land, rural art dream happen. Yeah. Oh yeah, cool. I'm glad everyone's here for the rural, anti-capitalist, queer art dream. Awesome. So this was 2012, 10 years ago. And the end of the world was coming. And I know the world has ended a lot of times in our lifetimes. This was not Y2K or the Japanese nuclear meltdown tidal wave that turned out to not be a big deal. It was before the snowpocalypse and the firestorms of the 2010s. This was 2012, the end of the Mayan calendar. And so we were all sitting around joking about where we wanted to be at the end of the world. And Fox said, Versailles, like Louis XIV's palace in France, where everyone wears wigs and heels all the time. And we were like, yes, that is us. Like being at Versailles, having a dance party at the end of the world, that's where we want to be. So when we found this house to rent in Southern Oregon, starting in December 2012, we decided to call it Versailles. And this house was in Hugo, north of Grants Pass, a couple miles off the highway on Jump Off Joe Creek Road. The house is old and it has blue siding, and it's kind of like squatting under the siskiyous that like rise up behind it. And it's on 2.5 acres with this meadow that leads down to the creek, and there's a swimming hole, and there's this barn that has this upstairs that's like perfect for dancing. And the house was 5 bedrooms and $800 a month. So the way that the property management saw it, I think they were like, these people have the money and they're not going to complain about the wiring. And the way we saw it, this was a French palace. And so we moved in with, we brought a van of stuff from our parents' house. We had like a kitchen table and several bins of costumes and wigs and a single king-size mattress that we put in the living room. And so one of my favorite early memories from Versailles was the never-ending soup. And we didn't have a lot of money, and so we had to be really creative about how we fed ourselves and how we used resources. And so the idea that we got was this never-ending soup where we would make a pot of soup, and then we would eat it down to just a little bit, and then we would use that as the base for the next soup. And we also didn't have a refrigerator. So it kind of introduced this like time thing where we were like, we have to eat it before it gets sour and bad so that it doesn't poison the rest of the soup for the entire winter. And also we were like the idea it was like that it would be like this kind of culture that, you know, that we were building, and it was super alive and kind of fermented and like, just like what's everything we stood for. It was this embodiment of like transformation and creativity. And the way other people might see it, it was a recipe for botulism. And the way my parents saw it, we were definitely wasting our university educations. But I felt like if we did that, if we had that never-ending soup all winter, we would be like real country queers. And one batch of soup that I want to tell you about was the squirrel soup. So we decided, okay. So we decided to host a housewarming and invite all our friends and family to see this beautiful place that we were living. And so, of course, it was a big deliberation about what we were going to serve. And at that time, we were learning a lot about processing roadkill, and we lived on a street where there was a lot of squirrels that got hit. And so we settled on squirrel soup. We were just learning about like living with the land, and this seemed like such a beautiful way to share that wildness with our kin. And so I peeled up a roadkill squirrel from the road, and I like took out the guts that make it bad, and skinned it and salted the hide to add to our collection. And then I stuck the squirrel in the pot, and it had a lot of little bones, but so then I took it out of the pot and took out all the little bones, and then put it back in and added vegetables. And that night, my aunt and uncle from Davis arrived to join the housewarming. And they are really nice, normal people. They like organic food. They love Ashland. And our other friends, the more kind of like wild, witchy crew, they also rolled in. And when it came time for dinner, I presented this soup so proudly. And the way I saw it, this was this food that connected all these people to our journey so far and connected them to the land and the acorns that had nourished the squirrels and the oak trees in our backyard and the car that hit the squirrel that was probably our neighbor. And I just hoped that like by being nourished by this soup and watching the fading light that people would see what we saw there. That squirrel soup really felt like the embodiment of Versailles, like this wild, magical realm of possibility and dreams that was like a little bit dirty and a little bit dangerous and had like some little bones left in it. And I hoped everyone would just feel that, and they would take it in, and they would like feel like they were part of it. And my Aunt Gail, she's so sweet. And I remember her just standing over that pot. And I think the way that she saw it, she had just driven 8 hours, and her nephew served roadkill for dinner. And so when they were leaving, I asked them like what they thought of the whole thing, of our house and the talent show and my friends. And my uncle said something really polite, and then he said, "It seems like there's a lot of pain in your community." And I guess that was not what I hoped that they would say. And it had truth. I mean, sometimes I felt so clear on this vision that I had about what Versailles was and what we were doing. And other times, shit was bleak. Like, yeah, I mean, we wanted to live deeply and rewild and, be good stewards and live close to the earth. And we didn't have the resources to do most of the things we were trying to do. We had all these seed catalogs. We couldn't afford seeds, really. And I sat on this stump behind the house for a lot of the winter, every day, with this stack of books from the library, cookbooks and gardening books and poetry, just planning and thinking and trying to plan the garden and learn how to do it and figure it out. And I was carrying all these expectations about what it meant to be an adult and what I was supposed to be or what I wanted to become. And I wanted to make great art, but I didn't really have an idea of how. And also a little wondering, is this it? Here we are in Josephine County, is this the dream? And I often just felt fucking terrified and so confused and so lost. And then when friends or folks in the community would kind of say to us, what are you doing here? That kind of compounded the despair because it was hard not to let that get under my skin. A couple years later, we moved out of Versailles to move on to other projects. And it was the end of that era. And I remember the last time that I was there at the house, or the last time I left, I remember crouching in the driveway, and I just cried, and I felt like my insides were coming out. And that's how I knew, I loved that house. I loved that time. And I hoped that the other folks who were moving into that house after us would see it a little bit the way I saw it, would feel some of that magic and wildness, and that maybe they would make a squirrel soup. And they did. I mean, young people did move into that house, and they filled it up with their dreams and their tender hearts, and they got a fridge. And for years, I felt really confused about that chapter of my life. And how to think about it. Was it this radical experiment, this amazing visionary thing that we were doing? Or was it lost, messy time? Did it matter? And I don't know. It's been 10 years. We moved in there 10 years ago. And a lot of people have lived in that house or have come through that house. Anybody who's lived in the Hugo house here? Okay. I told some of them that I was telling this story tonight. But I think maybe that telling you this story tonight maybe is just part of the spell. And maybe that you might see and might even love a little bit of what I love about that house. Thank you.
All right, how many people have long-distance loves running through their mind, houses that they had in their 20s that they can't believe, that they lived that way without a fridge, right? I think the never-ending stew is a metaphor for hope. It's shh, fill it up, shh, fill it up. Okay, we have 2 more storytellers before intermission. How y'all feeling? Thumbs up? Yeah? Amazing. Awesome. Okay, I get to introduce the amazing Grace. Grace Reynolds. Grace Reynolds has worn lots of hats. Parent, lumber mill resaw operator, television director, English teacher, magazine editor, coder, and now as a business analyst where she tells stories about numbers. She shares her life and land with her wife, husband-in-law, and a whole bunch of animals on a farm sanctuary. She's a good cook and a fair mechanic, and she's a great storyteller. Come on up, Grace.
I'm going to pander just shamelessly to you while I establish myself in the space. At 1 o'clock this afternoon, I started getting the halo of a hangover. You know where my head is. The halo of a migraine. So the lights are very bright and the sounds are very strong. So I'm just going to pander to you to say, be kind. There are 3 things that you should know for this story. The first, in 2017, I had facial surgery as part of my transition. All this God-given beauty just needed a little help from Dr. Meltzer. The second thing you should know is that the recovery was long. I spent 2 weeks in a hospital, or in a hotel next to the hospital, and then another 4 weeks at home, where I was told I was not to do anything which is counter to my being. And the third thing you should know is that my kids, who were 13 and 16 at the time, stayed with my ex-wife. And I was so nervous that night when I went to pick them up. They hadn't seen me since my surgery. And I didn't know how they were going to react. I mean, this was so exciting for me. I was getting a chance to see the face that I'd always wanted to see in the mirror and not cringe at photographs, but I was changing the face of a parent for my kids. And they had struggled with my transition, all of them. I mean, my whole family, including my ex-wife, as you might understand. But my oldest, he struggled the most. And so this was the over-caffeinated, jangly vibe that was in the truck when I got in the truck that night to go pick them up. And I'm driving, and about a half mile from my ex-wife's house, I get a phone call from her. And after our divorce, phone calls generally weren't warm. They were often a sign that something was wrong, and this was no different, right? She called, I answered, and she said, after some very brief pleasantries, he's not coming home with you, meaning my oldest. He's going to stay with me, and I'm keeping the cat. See, I'd left my dog and my cat with her as well while I was out at the hospital. And so I pulled into the nearest parking lot, which happened to be a church, and I am not a religious person, but I'll take it as a grace, to pardon the pun, from whatever higher power there is to provide me with just this momentary space. So I pull in, we have a brief and very direct conversation, and I call my therapist right after, because I knew this was going to be a really hard night, and she was gracious enough to be on call. And she gave me this advice. She said, I want you to call your son. She's very directive, which is not normal, but in this case it was important. I want you to call your son. I want you to start with whatever he wants is fine. You say, whatever you want is fine. If you want to stay with your mom, that's great. If you want to come with me, that's fine. You want to change your mind a few times, totally fine, whatever. And then you tell him you love him, and then you do what he wants. And I thought, okay, I got this, right? I'm sure there's some miscommunication, or who knows what had happened. Things get lost in translation all the time, right? And so I call him, and I start down that script, and I say, well, what do you want? And he says, I want to stay with mom. And there it was, right? This was the moment that I had feared since I even started thinking about transition, that embracing who I was going to cost me in my relationship with my kids. And it took a lot of work to realize that might be a price I'd have to pay. And so I told him, that's great. Whatever you want is fine. If you want to stay there, you can change your mind. You don't have to change your mind. And I love you. And I hung up the phone, and I sat there in the parking lot for as long as I could. And I drove to her house to pick up my youngest and my dog, knowing that there would be an empty seat in the truck on the way home. And I left the cat because sometimes there's only so much fuel in the fight tank, right? My oldest never stayed another night in my house. I left his room exactly as it was. The bed was unmade, the posters were on the wall. the Legos, the Star Wars Legos we put together, were in his closet. And I was harboring this hope that, that he would want to come back and stay. And it seemed important to leave things the way they were, just in case. And not just for me, but for him. And I did my best to give him space. I dressed down when I would see him. I would make sure I was wearing, jeans and a t-shirt, pull my hair back. I stopped going to his games. He played 3 sports, basketball, football, ran track. And that was no longer a thing for me to go to. He had made that request. And as he was getting older and approaching graduation, he said, you can come to my graduation, but I need you to dress like Dad. So you can bet I went out and bought a suit and a tie, and with the help of my wife, made an evening of it. And did my best impression of a man, which I'm not terribly good at. And when it came time for him to go to college, I stayed home. His mom took him to college and got him all set up, and I stayed home. And lest you think I think of myself as some paragon of parenting, let me assure you I've made a lot of mistakes. Some of them still haunt me. Some of them are very funny, and some aren't so much. And there was this part of me that sat with this idea that, he would come to me when he was, 30 years old and say, wow, I'm really sorry that I hurt you, that I made this choice. And then when I'm in my right mind and I realize what's actually happening here, all that went away, right? He was 16 years old. He was in sports, all the locker room, stuff that goes along with this. I cannot imagine how intolerable it must have been to have a parent who was transitioning at that time. Of course he didn't want me around. Of course he needed separation. And so what I did was I treated him. Many of you are from Ashland, I assume. You see the deer in the yards because they are just fearless, and you may have feelings about that. But imagine sitting out on your front porch, and there's a deer, and you don't have angry feelings toward that deer, right? You're there, and you're observing. And you might want that deer to come near you. What you do is you sit, and you watch, and you wait. And the deer might come, the deer might not. And so I started to use this metaphor. And I would reach out to him, by text, mostly just to say, hey, how are you doing? Do you need any clothes? You got enough money? And I love you. And he would text back. And then he started texting on his own. And then he started making calls. And usually the texts were like, hey, my PC is jacked. I've got a virus because I was trying to dox somebody, and can you help me? And it's like, I'm not going to help you hack someone. However, here's how you might want to clean that. Or he might make a phone call and say, hey, a good friend of mine has a Honda Civic that's not running. Do you know anything about changing a timing belt? It's like, yeah, I can walk you through that. And so these things started happening. And on New Year's Day this year, he texts me and he says, hey, I'm having some trouble. I need a little extra help with tuition. And I'm like, okay, it's all good. How much do you need? And he said, well, I'm feeling guilty about that, right? I say, okay, you're 20 years old. I don't expect you to have it all figured out. I mean, I was a mess at 20, so, everybody needs help. It takes time to launch. And then he says, I don't think you understand. I feel guilty because we haven't been close. And it's mostly because of decisions that I've made. But you're still my dad. And in that moment, I just melted. I was still his dad. And I held on to that, like I'd been holding on to this talisman of if you love something, let it go. That really lousy cliche, right? The one that's on coffee mugs. I had been holding on to that. And all those thoughts of, when he's 30 years old, he's going to come to me, just evaporated. And I saw him really clearly for the first time. And I said, it's okay. You did the best you could. Right? I mean, every kid has to separate from their parents, right? That is what we do. You just had to do it under some really interesting circumstances, and you did a great job. I love you and I'm proud of you. And I meant every single word of it. And I really felt the truth of that cliche, right? That I had not lost my son. I had just let him go. And I tell you that as a sign of hope, right? It was one of those things where I was putting my faith in a few words and a few notions. And I had no idea if this was going to turn out to be the right thing. You know, as Danielle said, it's that space where you don't know what's going to happen next. I can say that for my cat, Smokey, it didn't turn out as well. The cat is still with my ex, and she's being very well taken care of. But there's one more thing that you should know about me, and that's that I'm just petty enough to hope that Smokey still pees on the bed now and again. So, thank you.
Wow. How we doing? Yeah? Good. I like it. I like it. Gosh. Hold on. Our next storyteller will take us a whole new place. So get ready. Okay? Are you ready? Yeah? Are you feeling the things? Remember earlier I asked you, it feels like hours ago, I asked you, what do you want out of this evening? Is it happening? Okay, cool. Just checking. Just wanted to do a check-in. Let me see. Sudhir, I found it. Okay. My friend Sudhir, he tells stories at the Lantern often, and whenever he does, I'm like, what's he gonna do? And I kind of wonder what's gonna come. And just like I'm waiting for his intro to pull up. And I realize, as someone who leads storytelling events out in the community, I know a lot about people's lives, but not always what they do and where they're from. I just know their stories. So, but I can't pull up Sudhir's intro. So I'm gonna just tell you what I know about him. Sudhir's hilarious. He lives in Ashland. He has some kids, young kids, a daughter. Yeah, and sometimes he tells stories about her. And I don't know, just come on up, Sudhir, and this will pull up. Yeah, come on up. Let's clap till he gets to the microphone. All right, good.
It's August 2000, and I've just arrived at Atlanta International Airport. I've taken my first flight ever in my life to come from Mumbai, India, to Atlanta, Georgia, to start a new job. I remember waiting at the airport for my bags, and I'm sweating, I'm nervous, and it doesn't help that I'm overdressed in 3 layers, because my friends in India told me it's going to be freezing cold in Atlanta in August. So not only am I overdressed, I got these 20 pockets all over. I got my passport, my visa, my job offer, but also things that my mom had packed for me because she thought I'm not going to find them over here. So one of the pockets had these little packets of Indian spices. I had turmeric powder, cardamom. I had masala chai mix. And in my bag, I have a box of mango pickle. I'm standing there waiting for my bags, and I'm smelling like Indian buffet out there. So I got picked up by one Mr. Rao. Now, Mr. Rao is the office manager at the company where I'm starting this new job. Mr. Rao is an elegant Indian man in his mid-50s, and he has a thick mustache and an even thicker Indian accent, just like I did. So that made me feel at home. Mr. Rao takes me to the company guest house, which he manages, he also lives in it. The first few days are pretty relaxing. Get over the jet lag, do some paperwork like, social security number, apply for a bank account. Day 3 comes around, and Mr. Rao gathers all 6 of us in the guest house. We are 6 guys in our mid-20s, recently immigrated from India. And Mr. Rao announces that we would all be going out that night. So we all got excited. Everybody shaved, dressed up, put some hair gel. And all of us had that strong immigrant perfume on. You know what I'm talking about? It's the one we bought at the airport at the duty-free shop for 50% off. So all 7 of us, including Mr. Rao, get in Mr. Rao's Toyota Corolla. And it is smelling like the Dubai International Airport in there. It's a mix of curry and cologne. So all of us head to downtown Atlanta. We get to this big building, it looks like a warehouse. A little dark, a little spooky. And outside, there's a sign that says cheetah. Like, wow, Mr. Rao, we going to the zoo in the night? I've never done that in India. Mr. Rao is all business, he's the only one with some cash and an ID. So he buys us tickets, and we all get some stamps on our hands. And I can already hear some kind of music coming from this building. As soon as we enter the building, I see a stage with bright lights. And I see naked ladies dancing upside down on poles. Like, wow, Mr. Rao, what a pleasant surprise. Now on the inside, I am nervous, I'm sweating profusely, and I miss my mom already. By this time, I'm praying to my Hindu gods, please don't get me deported on day 3. So Mr. Rao gets a table, he orders some beers, and we try to settle down, but we are all feeling out of place. Everybody's looking at us weird. Who are these aliens over here? I feel like a fish out of water, but at a strip club. So I'm looking at the stage where all the action is, and I see a 7-foot-tall man, and he has long hair, he's blonde, and he's talking to the ladies up there. He seems to know them because they seem to be having a good time. A couple of minutes later, he's done talking to them. He turns around, I look at his face, and I scream, "Kevin Nash!" Now that's the WWF wrestler I used to watch on TV in India. Growing up in India, we had access to only a few shows, the show Friends, WWF wrestling, obviously some pirated VHS tapes of Playboy Channel, and a lot of Eddie Murphy movies. So when I screamed like that, there were about 6 cowboys sitting right next to us at a table. And these were real cowboys from the South, just like we'd seen in Western movies in India. Big belt and boots and everything. When I screamed Kevin Nash, one of the guys got really startled, and he spilled his beer. He was already drunk, so he got real mad at us. He started yelling and cursing at us. But I understood, I caused it. Things calmed down a bit. I go to the restroom. I come back, and Mr. Rao has literally pulled some strings by now. Because there is a naked lady dancing on top of our table now. Her name was Hope. Now, Hope was so exotic looking that if she did a 23andMe test today, her results would come back looking like a Jackson Pollock painting. So exotic. So Hope is dancing on the table, we're having some beers. All of a sudden, one of the cowboys who's still mad from the earlier incident, he decides to pick a fight with us. He spills some beer on one of our guys. Now, us Indians, not particularly known for aggression and fighting, but guess what? We'd watched a lot of Bollywood movies. So all of us got up, all 6 of us, started yelling and screaming at these guys. And they're screaming back at us. But our yelling is happening in 6 different languages. They're yelling in Southern accent. I for sure thought, that's the real version of the game, Cowboys and Indians. So Hope is still dancing on the table, but she's also yelling at these guys because she saw what they did. And out of the corner of my eye, I see Kevin Nash, the wrestler, rush towards us. And I thought he's going to take all of us down. And he starts yelling. He's like, guys, this is what I do for a living. I throw chairs and people around. Stop this. And in the midst of this chaos and pandemonium, I go, Mr. Kevin Nash, can I please have your autograph? He's like, not now. He got real mad. Unfortunately, our bouncers get called and our 6 friends get thrown out of the club. We have a decent time, and as we're getting ready to leave, we're walking through the parking lot towards Mr. Rao's Toyota Corolla. And a Lamborghini pulls up right next to us. The window rolls down, and guess who it is? It is Hope the dancer. You guys are hopeless. And Hope says, I'm sorry what happened in there. I hope you guys will come back and see me. And she hands me her business card. Later that night, and then the most amazing thing was the window goes back up. And I saw Hope drive into the dark night. Later, I'm laying in my bed at the guest house trying to get some sleep. I'm still covered in glitter and I'm smelling like Hope. And I'm trying to reflect on my first few days in the US. It's only day 3. I've had my first night out, my first trip to a strip club, my first bar fight, my first celebrity spotting, and my first crush on a stripper named Hope. And as I'm slowly dozing off, I hear an Eddie Murphy voice in the back of my head, which goes, "Welcome to America." So here we are, 20 years later, still thinking and talking about hope. Well, at least I am. And I miss those days where we could solve problems with a little bit of hope and a couple bouncers. So tonight, 20 years later, with all the problems going on in the world, we just had an election, a lot of divisions. I urge you to look around. And I'm pretty sure you'll find a hope, a destiny, for sure a grace in the audience, ready to help us solve all our problems. And if not, come see me after the show because I still have Hope's business card. Thank you very much.
Sudhir grew up in the Himalayas in India. It's not funny. And has been a technologist for over 20 years. His current focus is mobile applications, artificial intelligence, and Web3 technologies. I don't even know what that means, Sudhir. He is on the board of Southern Oregon Friends of Hospice and also volunteers as an Oregon long-term care ombudsman, advocating for the rights of residents in assisted living facilities. Oh my God, this is a great night. Whew. All right. So here's the plan, y'all. We're gonna hear a song by the amazing Heather Lee. I like saying it really fast because it's like Heather Lee, but it's Heather Lee. We're gonna hear a song and then we're gonna go to intermission. What I want to talk to you about is we heard stories about war, about love letters. We heard stories about Versailles and soup that never ends and botulism and squirrels and roadkill and normal people who eat organic food. And we heard stories about, wow, my brain just dropped off. But we heard stories about reconnecting with someone and trusting that the relationship will hold. We heard stories about hope dancing on a table, bar fights coming to America. Okay, so things in your life are churning, right? You have things you're thinking about, right? Okay, I am going to be out at a table that's labeled Introvert Special, because not only in the second half will we hear from a few storytellers in the audience, spontaneous storytellers, we are also inviting the introverts who would never ever get on this microphone to write a story, and I'll read it anonymously. Isn't that cool? It's called the Introvert Special. We're gonna have a lot of fun in the second half. Are there any questions about that? Okay, Kendra will open us up in the second half. You're gonna have like 15 minutes to hang out and eat cookies and run for your lives to the spontaneous second half of the hearth. But I'd like to invite Heather Lee to come up. Heather Lee is a mother of 3. One of her kiddos just went off to college, who's gonna be like a rocket scientist or something amazing. And I had a great conversation with her. She's a single mom. She's a musician committed to creating music and community. And she also just an amazing person, just wants to create, and she's gonna engage you, and this will sort of portal us to that second half of spontaneity. Heather, come on up, I'm doing way too much talking. You're all set?
I think so. I'll have to pull this over just a little bit.
Anything I can do to be of service? No, you got it, you're good.
Pull this up. Okay, well, there are a lot of people here. All right, let's see if I can find where these were before. So hi, my name is Heather Lee, and I am a mom of 3 teenagers. And yes, that has been an interesting journey these past couple of years. And the song that I want to sing, I used to sing to them when they were little as a lullaby. And when my oldest was getting ready to graduate this spring, I found myself sitting by the river and singing it to myself and then just weeping afterwards, because this is Joni Mitchell's The Circle Game that speaks to the hope of children and teenagers and young adults, and refinding that over and over again, and there will be new dreams and better dreams and plenty. And in these past couple of years, I think those of us who have teenagers in our lives know that there have been times that we had to hold the hope for them because it was really hard for them. And so this song for me is just a renewal of that hope again and again, and reminding. Since a lot of people know this song, to sing with me on the chorus. If you do know it, you are absolutely welcome and invited, and I would love that. So, me. All right, let's see if this sound setup is still there. Everybody here okay? Yesterday, a child came out to wonder, caught a dragonfly inside ajar. Fearful when the sky was full of thunder, and tearful at the falling of a star. Here's a chorus. And the seasons, they go round and round, and the painted ponies go up and down. We're captive on the carousel of time. We can't return, we can only look behind from where we came, and go round and round and round in the circle game. Then the child moved 10 times round the season, skated over 10 clear frozen streams. Words like, when you're older, must appease him, and promises of someday make his dreams. And the seasons, they go round and round, and the painted ponies go up and down. We're captive on the carousel of time. We can't return, we can only look behind from where we came, and go round and round and round in the circle game. 16 springs and 16 summers gone now. Cartwheels turn to car wheels through the town. But be careful, don't you hurry, it won't be long now before you drag your feet just to slow the circles down. And the seasons, they go round and round, and the painted ponies go up and down. We're captive on the carousel of time. We can't return, we can only look behind from where we came, and go round and round and round in the circle game. The years went by, and now the boy is 20, and his dreams have lost a lot of grandeur coming true. But there'll be new dreams, there'll be better dreams, plenty, before the last revolving year is through. And the seasons, they go round and round, and the painted ponies go up and down. We're captive on the carousel of time. We can't return, we can only look behind from where we came, and go round and round and round in the circle game. And go round and round and round in the circle game. Thank you for singing with me.
Thank you, Heather Lee. Everyone enjoy intermission. I'll see you back here in 15. Hopefully it's not too late for you and you got it. Come back and see us. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to the the hearth. Yes, yes. And some folks during intermission were asking me about the lantern. So the lantern is also a storytelling event. It requires introverts and extroverts. Apparently, the hearth is more made up of introverts than extroverts. But the next lantern is actually November 16th. So you could hit 2 storytelling events within the same month. Oh my God. That could be amazing. So as promised, I want to get y'all in bed by 9:30. Not all of you together in bed with me. Just like you go to your bed and yes. The queen of improv just laughed at me. Winning. Okay, so we lost about half the audience, so kudos to you for being the spontaneous half. And here we go. Yes, let's do this. So, as promised, we will have Kendra come up and transition us into spontaneous storytelling. We have one brave storyteller out in the audience who's going to come up, and I have 4 introvert specials. Isn't that fun? What a great way to wrap up this gorgeous evening together. Yes, applause, applause. Okay. Kendra lives in Ashland with her husband, Chris. She spends time working in local schools, walking her dog, making art, and awaiting calls and visits from their 3 adult children. It's true. She's the prevention coordinator and educator with Jackson County SART, as well as part of the local improv group, the Amazons. Let's welcome Kendra up here.
Well, I'm happy that, because now I can say, wow, there's not as many of you here. Whew. And I'm not taking it personal, of course, it's late. So hi, my name is Kendra, and I'm just gonna start. My story starts in 2004, 4th of July. And we're here in Ashland at my friend's house on Faith Street celebrating my friend's birthday. It's actually my friend's birthday, but we're also celebrating. There was something else happening that day. I don't know, there's a big parade and stuff. But anyways, people were handing out sparklers and things like that. It's 4th of July. So we were out back on the deck playing with sparklers and other home, fireworks. It was 2004. We were still doing fireworks in town and things like that. So we had that going, and we were just finishing that up. It was dark. We were ready for going into the house and having birthday cake and starting the next more mellow part of the evening. And so we clean up all this stuff, all the buckets of water, all the sparkler bits and everything, and we get all the kids into the house. Our kids are little at the time, and so we get all their stuff and get them, and we're about to get them ready to settle in for some cake and maybe a movie, and the grown-ups are gonna rest. Those of you who have little kids, you know what we mean, that last, okay, whew, we've got cake, I'm gonna be over here, breathing, okay. So the flurry of moving from outside to inside settled, and there was a moment of pause between the next transition, and all of a sudden we hear from outside, boom, crack, 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 boom, crack, 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 crack. And it's the fireworks. It's the town fireworks that we used to have, and we don't anymore, and that's okay. We're all good with that, right? But at the time, we were doing them, and go, and their eyes got really big like little kids got, and they got really all good and wonderful, And all the grown-ups got so grown up in that moment. I'm sorry, some of you who were there are here, but they got like way grown up in that moment. And they were doing things like, oh, no, if we go, it's going to be over by the time we get there. Like, we just don't even bother. We had our time. It's time for cake. Let's all sit down. No. And the kids were just heartbroken. They were just heartbroken. What? We're not even going to try? We're not even going to try to go? Can't we just try? And in that moment, I had this, kids. In that moment, I was transported back to 4th of July, 2003. And I was sitting in a hospital room with my dad in a hospital gown. He'd been experiencing a lot of pain in his back for a month or so. And the doctors in Grants Pass, we were in Josephine County at the time, couldn't figure out what was going on. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. I'm moving around a lot. I'm sorry, I'm seeing the sound people like, what's going on? Apologies for those who are listening. I move. So anyways, my dad had been trying to figure out what was going on. He was in and out of the hospital. Doctors were turning him away. It was at the time where they were trying to not prescribe so many painkillers. And so for his pain, they were saying things like, do massage, that kind of stuff. What you need to know is a year prior to this, my dad had been hit by a car at the parking lot of his work. Poor man, he was just sitting there waiting. He had just gotten back to work, and he had only been there a couple months from healing from having his bladder removed because he had bladder cancer. And he was hit by a car. So I think the doctors thought that maybe he was trying to get more drugs or something. What you need to know about my dad too is before all of that, in 99, he had a heart surgery. He had a bypass surgery. And when I was a child, he had a bypass surgery. He had a lot of surgeries. He had a lot of medical issues and problems. He had a lot of early childhood trauma and stress, and he just had a lot of problems. So we're sitting in the hospital bedroom on 4th of July, 2003, and the town is celebrating. Boom, 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 you're hearing the fireworks. And my mom had been on this journey with my dad, trying to figure out what was going on. And my dad was tired, as you can imagine. And one of the nurses pulled my mom aside and said, hey, you know what? You should try to go up to OHSU. They've got a great hospital there. It's a college hospital. They're, front and center on stuff. They'll figure out what's going on. And so my dad was reluctant to go. As you can imagine, he was kind of done with hospitals. He was tired. He just wanted to sleep and rest and not be in pain. So my mom asked me to go sit with him and say, hey, let's give this a try. Can we just try? And so that's what I did. I sat with him, and I don't know if I was the thing that made him go. I think he'd already made his decision, but the decision was made. The next day, we went off to OHSU, me, my mom, my brother, and my dad, drove him up to the hospital, admitted him. Within 48 hours, they found cancer. He had colon cancer. And so for us, this history with my dad had always been, he's sick, we go to the doctor, we find out what's wrong, they fix him, we have him back. That's kind of how it went. So to us, it was like, good, great, you figured it out, now we're going to fix it. Awesome. And they were like, yeah, we've got a plan. We're getting chemotherapy. It's going to be great. We'll get it started here, and then we'll get it started down in Josephine County. You can take him home next week. So I went home, and I was going to be back that next weekend to pick my mom and him back up to go down and take him home. That next morning when I got home, I got a call that when they started the chemo on him, his kidney failed. And so they had to take him to emergency surgery. I should get back up there as soon as possible. So I got my Harry Potter on tape. That's what I was reading at the time. I didn't know about J.K. Rowling and her horrible views on gender and all that stuff. Did not know. So anyways, I have since banished. But at the time, that's what I had. And I drove all the way to Portland. I may have gotten there in 2 hours. I don't know. Our journey there kind of started. We were there for about a month. My dad in and out of a medically induced coma. I really didn't get to talk to him much, and when I did, it wasn't really clear. And at some point, the doctors took me, my mom, and my brother into the room and said, we need to talk. Your dad, well, they didn't say your dad, David, isn't gonna do well. And if we even figure out what's going on with the kidney, we still have the chemo and, you know, all this stuff. And we knew my dad was tired when he got up there. So we had to make that decision. We weren't able to ask him because he wasn't aware. So we decided to go ahead and let him go. And my dad passed away in Portland, Oregon on July 27th, 2003. So there I am, 2004, with the kids just, why can't we just try? And I'm like, you know what? You're right. You're right, kids. You grown-ups are grown-ups right now, and I'm not okay with it, okay? And I don't mean any disrespect to grown-ups right now, but sometimes we can forget to try. And so I grabbed the keys and I said, you know what, kids? I'll take you. And I instantly became the best favoritist grown-up in that moment. And I grabbed the keys, and the kids were behind me, and we were a parade of determination walking towards the door. And the other grown-ups were like, well, it's gonna be a waste of time, blah, blah, blah. But we marched on, me and the kids, trailing behind. And we opened that door to go to the car, and we walked out onto the lawn, and there, in the front yard, was the fireworks show. Right in the front yard, right there. I sat down with my keys and my bag and all the stuff that I gathered to take them, and we just sat and we laughed and we hollered. We did let the grown-ups in. We decided we should. So we all came out and we watched the fireworks show. And it was beautiful, and it was a wonderful view, and it was exactly what the kids needed and what I needed, quite frankly. Because sometimes when you try, it doesn't work out. And then sometimes when you try, it does. So, thank you.
You're like my favorite grown-up, too. Okay, so there's two things I put in the introvert special: what gives you hope, and share a story from your life about a time you lost hope and found it. Are you ready to hear the first introvert special of the night? Okay, I asked, what gives you hope? The response? Flowers growing from a crack in the sidewalk. Recovering from surgery and no longer being in pain. Children's laughter and spontaneity. Do you want to know what one of the 22 people said to me today? Remember a while back? What gives you hope? They said, when people hold the door for me. Like, that's such the basic one, right? But like, it means something. Today, when I thought of that, and an older woman held the door for me, and they looked her in the eye, and I said, thank you. And she went, oh, you're welcome. And I was like, wow, this hope thing. Like it. All right. Laura, you want to come up and tell a story? Yeah, let's clap for Laura. That's good. When you're at the lantern, you clap until the storyteller arrives at the microphone. That's the rule. I didn't tell you, so thanks for rolling with that. I'm not even going to introduce you.
Okay. I volunteer for these things and then I regret it. No. Well, I want to tell you a story about my son. When he was little, he started kindergarten, and immediately we started having problems, fighting and just all kinds of stuff. And when he was in the second grade, he was 7, and it had escalated, and we were constantly getting calls from the teacher about fights and just all kinds of problems. And we had gotten to a point that we were frustrated, and we didn't know what to do about it. And we'd tried rewards, and we'd tried punishments, and all these different things, and nothing was working. And the night before this incident happened, we'd had this really serious conversation, and I'd said, look, this is it. You've got to straighten up, whatever. I'm talking to a 7-year-old, whatever that language was. And the next day, he gets off the bus, and he gets off, and 2 little girls come out, and they're crying, and they said that he'd hit them. And I looked at him, I'm like, dude, what the hell? Good parenting. And he looked at me, and he said, they were looking at me. And it clicked for me that this wasn't normal. There was something going on. And so I took him to a therapist, and within a few months, we had an autism diagnosis. And autism. And it was scary because all of a sudden there was this big thing that I didn't understand. And at the same time, there was a diagnosis and something to go off of. Well, I wish I could tell you things got easier, but they didn't, because while he is very, very high functioning, he ended up going to 5 different schools over the next 6 years. It was really hard. He flunked out of a 2-week orientation at Armadillo Tech for 6th grade. We ended up getting him back in there for 8th grade 2 years later. And it didn't get easier. It was still hard. And he, the fights, the meltdowns over sensory issues, there were so many things. And then he started to mature a little bit. And in his junior year, he started ditching school. But it was 1 day a week, and it's because he was going down to Planned Parenthood in Medford, and he was standing out there with his pride flag to counter the salt shakers. He stood on the corner by himself. I'm not even sure for how long this went on until somebody else saw him and started coming and standing with him. And pretty soon more people started coming. And it started to become this little bit of a movement, and he named it the Pepper Shakers. And my son is Torin, for those of you who may know him. And he's very passionate about what he does. And I will tell you that during those high school years, we were afraid he wasn't going to graduate. We were afraid he wouldn't be able to hold down a job. All of these dreams that you have for your kid, I was afraid wasn't going to happen for him. But then he got into all this social justice work, and he found his calling. And let's see, about 6 months ago, he moved out. He moved up here to Ashland to live with a friend. And all of a sudden, he's like the responsible one in his friend group. It's so weird. Because one of the great things about autism is he's very black and white thinking, and he doesn't drink, and he thinks drugs are horrible, and so he's the one being responsible and cleaning up after everybody, right? But all of a sudden, I have all this hope for him, right? Because I've seen what an amazing human being he is, and the people that he's touched in his life. He's a protector. And I'm so proud of him. And everywhere I go in this valley, if I mention his name, people are like, oh yeah, I know Torin. And I didn't know if that was ever going to happen, and it has. And I am so blessed for that. I'm so blessed to have such an amazing human being in my life. So.
Beautiful. A couple of years ago, I got in touch with a college roommate from 1968. She lives in Santa Monica now and told me she still had my letters from those years. She mailed them, and I'm still going through them, rantings and all. Afraid, not afraid, a friend, which is better, huh? A friend and I went for a hike in the Soda Mountain Wilderness. We hit 4 miles and looked for the, I don't know what that word is, the end. At mile 7, it started snowing. At mile 7, it started snowing. No end in sight. At mile 10, we found a Forest Service road. At mile 12, it started sleeting. At mile 2, hunters passed us in a pickup and confirmed we were going the right way. At mile, I hope I'm getting this right, at mile 14.5, they drove back and picked us up. a ride for the final 7 miles to the car. Man, that is hope right there. Oh my God. That's dangerous is what that is. All right, everybody. Something we do at the Lantern is what I call a story thread. And throughout the night, I write down little nuggets from people's stories, and then I read them at the end. So that's what I did. I took something from everybody who talked. Are you ready? This is what we created tonight. I jumped into a hole in the ground and hid until that activity was over. I love you. I can return as much love as you can give, and that's the answer to life. I felt that if we had that never-ending soup all winter, we would be real country queers. Is this it? Is this the dream? I was harboring this hope that he would come back and stay. It seemed important to leave things as they were for him in case he came back. So, hope is dancing on the table and we're having some beers. All the grown-ups got way grown up in that moment. The kids were like, we're not even going to try. We were a parade of determination. He stood on the corner by himself with the pride flag, and then someone else joined him, and then more people joined him. All of the sudden, I have all of this hope. So, let me make sure I got this right. I got to do the hearth tonight. I want, what? Little banter, yeah, we're getting ready to close, so here's what I want. I want you to get to bed, because it's late. And I want to say, you know, I have a list in case of emergencies, break in case of emergencies. And I think this is what I want to close with, because it's like a metaphor for, it is hope. The Diary of Anne Frank, right? You all know this book? It's a little book. Did anyone not read the diary? Don't be ashamed. Did anyone not read the Diary of Anne Frank? Yeah, a few people. Okay, well now you're get ready, use bookstore, here they come. So the Diary of Anne Frank, on the first page of the book, she writes about receiving the diary on her birthday. And she talks to the diary as she's writing in it, and she says, I'm going to confide in you like I haven't confided in anybody else. And I hope you can hear me, and I hope that you can give me the support that I need. So that's the first page of the book, and she celebrates that she gets this diary as a gift. It's one of the gifts on her table. So I wanted to leave you with that, because I think that book is like a metaphor for hope. If someone can find hope in those darkest of times, I'm certain that we can too. So thank you, everybody, for a wonderful night, and I'll see you at the Lantern. Yeah, November 16th. And don't forget about the great event that is happening. 20th. Oh my God. Thanks, everybody. It's November 20th. It's on Facebook. Find it. It's at the Black Sheep. They list it. Don't listen to me. I don't know what I'm talking about. The Rogue Valley Mentors, thank you. Thank you to all our volunteers. What else? You have a great night. Thanks, everybody. How's it going?